So the cost of running a government, or part of the cost of running a federal government deficit, is the increased interest rate and the crowded out investment that would have taken place. So that makes calculating this expenditure multiplier complicated, because there's going to be the negative effect of any crowding out, which is going to drive down investment, but there's also the benefits of federal government trying to stimulate the economy. And so we're going to first take a look at this government expenditure multiplier, but some of the ideas we use here are also going to be applicable when we find the government tax multiplier as well. So when we're looking at, or when we're calculating the government expenditure multiplier, this M, what we're trying to find is, given a $1 increase in government expenditure, government's going to spend more money. We're just going to keep it simple. We're going to keep it at $1. So essentially we're saying for every dollar in government, in the increase in government expenditures, how much does real GDP increase? How many dollars does real GDP go up? And so if we use the National Income Accounting Identity, or our aggregate expenditure formula for calculating real GDP, well, government expenditure is going to increase by $1. And that's also going to affect consumption and investment. We talked about how it's going to affect investment through crowding out, meaning investment is actually going to decrease due to the increase in government expenditure. However, consumption should increase. And the reason consumption should increase is because if the government expenditure increases, meaning the government has to spend more, they spend more money, they're buying more things, presumably from domestic firms. Well, when that happens, if firms' revenues are increasing, well, when firms' revenues increase, this is going to create an increase in the demand for labor, which is going to drive up employment, increasing household income. And with households having more income, they then buy more stuff. Consumption increases. So what we have is this multiplying effect from the government, from the increase in government expenditure. Why? Because the multiplying effect being that consumption increases. However, there's also this negative effect on investment because of crowding out. So given these counterbalancing effects, increase in consumption driving up output, and the decrease in investment driving down output, well, the government expenditure multiplier, this M, it'll be greater than 1, meaning there will be an increase in output greater than the $1 increase in government expenditure if the increase in consumption is greater than the decrease in investment from crowding out. This is an important threshold, this threshold of 1, of the multiplier being equal to 1, because the goal of the government expansionary fiscal policy by the government and the government increase in spending is to stimulate the economy, meaning we want output to increase by more than the government expenditure increase to promote future growth. However, if the decreased investment, if crowding out if a lot of investment is crowded out, partially because the government is already running a high deficit and they have to borrow even more, creating even more crowding out, well, then the effect of the expansionary policy could be relatively small. So the question is, when does an increase in government spending lead to a large increase in consumption and a relatively small decrease in investment. Estimates of the government expenditure multiplier using exogenous events or using random events that have caused the government expenditure to increase, things like wars, pandemics that we've seen recently, although that's not included in the study. And it's found that the expenditure multiplier is somewhere between 0.6 and 1.2, at least in the US. The IMF has estimated it to be about 1.5 for the long run multiplier calculations. The key takeaway is maybe not necessarily what the magnitude of the multiplier is, but when is expansionary policy through increases in government spending most effective? And the general takeaway is that the government expenditure multiplier is larger when we're in recessionary times, when real GDP is relatively below trend or well below trend, and trend being when the economy is at full employment. During recessionary times, we see that government stimulus or government increases in government spending have a relatively larger effect in stimulating the economy than when the economy is operating close to trend or the labor market's at full employment.